Well, welcome again to another one of our meetings of the Consulting Amigos. We've got three Consulting Amigos here today. Ed Lasik, who's a CPA, and John Mills, who's an entrepreneur and owner of real estate, deals with small business in his real estate venture. And he's also been a consultant for many years. Was in the electronic business. Edward has been in the newspaper business and done consulting for years with all kinds of businesses, manufacturing, et cetera. He's also kind of a real estate maven in the making in his own right. And myself, Ron Burgess. So I'm happy to welcome you all here today. This is a session of the Consulting Amigos, and we also are called by microgiants sort of like the expert topics people. And today we thought that the topic that we should discuss is really the use of outside consultants by small business. So we recognize that small businesses come in very, very small packages, and they don't have a lot of money to hire expensive consultants. But then there are also others that have got 5 employees doing pretty well that need some help, and up to 100 employees. And all along the way, as it gets more complicated and more complicated and more complicated with all of the rules and regulations, from just starting your business to building buildings and hiring people. That particularly, there's a tough one. But then you also throw in all the technical stuff. Out in our area in Southern California, we've got AQMD. There are other environmental issues all throughout the country, and of course, EPA is there. Each county has got its own rules, so there's just nothing but bureaucracy out there to try and keep us all squared away, apparently, but also to get in our way. And so that's another consulting area that is very valuable. But there are small business people that might not like and need, and many who don't know they need outside help. And so what we want to talk about today really is the whole concept of how do you hire a consultant? What do you expect them to do? What kind of performance do you need from them? And what kind of results should you expect? Just sort of the whole spectrum of getting outside help from consultants. And so with that, I guess what we'll do maybe is just I'll throw it to Ed, and Ed comes from the accounting profession, but he's also certified in business valuation. He's also been a COO, which is unusual for CPAs. So he's been in operations for decades and decades. So he really has a broad sense of sort of the number driving part of as well as the people part, but the numbers that drive business and where people go wrong in numbers and where they need help in terms of numbers. Can you, Ed, outline the several sort of broad categories of where people need help because you know that they're making mistakes or bad decisions. Give us 5 or 6 areas in your area of expertise where people need some help.
Well, I think it all comes down to the old phrase, you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's the biggest question here to answer because a lot of business owners out there, they just don't look outside their business. They're so focused day in and day out on running their business that they don't have the time to talk to other people. And I can honestly say in my 30 some years of experience, every time I brought in a consultant, and many times they were brought in without my approval, it was somebody had the foresight in the company to bring them in, like Bain Company, which is
Oh, yeah.
the big ones. Every time I learned so much. They brought up things that we weren't accustomed to and we didn't even knew existed. And this was really, really important to our development, and we learned to really add a lot of value to our company by using them. Now, some of them are very expensive, like you noted, but a lot of them aren't that expensive, and they do add significant value. Um, you talked about what areas. Well, valuation is one. Very few small businesses have a valuation of their company. Second of all is anything on the financial side, like on how to collect receivables quicker or
Mm.
with less inventory and improve your working capital. I think a lot of small businesses have really a lot of difficulty managing their working capital, especially after COVID. Several of my companies have doubled the need for working capital since COVID. And if you're not trying new techniques, you're going to get really hurt by that aspect. A lot of times, you may grow your revenue by $1 million, but by the time you look at what you really bring into the bottom line, it's a negative number. And a lot of business owners don't realize that. So I guess the bottom line is I don't know if I can give you seven of them, but another one would be the marketing side, which you're well aware of. Boy, there's all kinds of things in that area, how to better connect with your customer, how to get greater value out of your customer, how to provide better service.
Those all require numbers, by the way.
Every one of them requires numbers, but it requires a owner that is open-minded and wants to learn. And if you have that qualification, there's a great opportunity. You can really significantly improve the operations of your business. And maybe John, maybe you got some other things you might want to add because you come from it from an IT standpoint, and IT is extremely important. You got
Yeah,
to have everything dialed in nowadays
yeah,
to be effective and productive.
yeah. John, give us four or five areas within the IT kind of as a broad category, but also sort of technology as a broader category that you notice that small people just need in terms of their operations on a day-to-day basis.
So, first of all, I want to support Ed in what he was saying here, which is, rare in a way because I don't come from the financial background area. I love getting the financial background correct, but I've found that quite often the reason why a consultant will be brought in is because there's a problem to be solved, and it's not a forward thinking, it's not a proactive thinking situation. It's normally, in my experience, it's been something's going on and we need to find a solution to it and we need help. And typically, in a sales world, it will come down to is we need to generate more sales. What they don't really talk about is they really need to be more efficient, or they need to have a better bottom line, or they need to review the supply side. They don't talk about that, but quite often it's like, no, we just need to grow or our sales to grow. And I have discovered, and I think most of us have discovered that a lot of that just comes back to our financial analysis. And so without being able to actually clearly know where you are from a financial point of view, I think there's no point going and solving problems because all of the problems you're going to solve have costs to them and they have benefits to them. So I would say the foundation of using consultant is having a good relationship with a financial services provider, your accountant, and be able to understand where the numbers are. Without that, it's just going to be he said, she said. Because at the end of the day, it really is about the money. It's about the cost of ownership. It's about depreciation. It's about future income that you're working towards. And quite often, a consultant can say, we need to actually move from the business we're doing today, which is very lucrative, and we need to do a change to go here. And here's why. And most business owners do not appreciate that kind of thinking because you're saying you mean we're gonna shrink so that we can grow. And the classic example of that for me would be where you have a company that has a significant amount of business in one segment or with one customer. And a couple of times I've been involved with a fairly large company that has over 50% of its business tied up in one particular segment of the industry. This comes back to the IT days. Back early, there was a very large US manufacturer of cell phones that controlled a big chunk of the business. And I was a consultant and worked with a provider of parts that the majority of their business kept on growing and growing and growing, but it ended up going to this one client. Well, the industry changed. This client's dominance in the industry shifted. All of a sudden, US phone manufacturers were not the only guys on the shelf. The company I was working with was really resistant to grow out its broad base of customers and was really in love with this large customer. They actually went out of business as a
Well,
result of not listening to a message of trying to curtail the growth of the large customer and expand their base in clearly their less lucrative but more stable businesses. And it all comes down to finance. So one of them that, when you bring a consultant in, they will hopefully disrupt your thinking, and hopefully they will challenge you clearly in ways that you don't think are beneficial. And if you're not open-minded enough to actually evaluate and say, well, maybe this is a right, and even take a small percentage and develop that.
so
It's
you're
it.
saying there, John, that the consultant brings in a broader knowledge, particularly in maybe in a singular or in a narrow area, bringing broader knowledge than an individual company owner might.
Well, absolutely. And typically the company that's going from a company owner dominated decision-making process to a board decision to a bringing in consultants to help on those decisions, the company owner or the ownership group is still very robustly believing that the way they did it is the way to do it. And there needs to be a psychological opening to say, hey, maybe it is still the way to do it. I'm not saying it's not, but let's change. Another classic example of this, I would say, would be General Motors, that did not in the 80s and 90s. They were fuel injection was, yeah, it was okay, it was good, but we don't really need it. We've still got a traditional form of injection going on. We have carburetors, and even into the 90s, they were producing large vehicles with carburetors on them, where the rest of the world had switched off to fuel injection 20 years ago.
Hmm.
But they had enough inheritance in making good carburation. They even had carburetors that were then electronically controlled. So they were very resistant in moving with that. And there's several reasons why they were resistant, but the bottom line was it cost them a huge chunk of business in America, where all of a sudden now it's we've got Toyota, we got Honda, we got Hyundai. General Motors has gone from being a dominant player to being a smaller player, significantly smaller.
Now, and of course, technology can lead and kill markets. But talk a little bit about the kind of support that a smaller business would need from a technical consultant, sort of on the day-to-day kind of things. I know you've been really involved and done a terrific job in building a network before people started thinking of this, even and even today, I think it's still kind of modern concept, and that is to build a whole network that is completely managed so that all of your tenants can come in and just plug into the wall and have really, really fast internet and not have to worry about that at all. As
Well,
opposed
okay,
to,
so we're going back to talk about how does technology is nothing but a tool to help uh, people communicate and do work. And I think for a while, people were in love with technology. I was one of them for the sake of technology. And we thought all we need to do is keep on implementing new technology and it'll be good. And that is not necessarily true. However, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Technology does help us communicate and control things way, way better as it has been evolving. So I would say the first thing that happens in a corporate environment is it's all based on communication. Um, I would say a classic example of this in the large scale that we can all relate to would be McDonald's. And McDonald's, fundamentally, it's all about potatoes and eggs and that. So you think it's a cooking business. Well, actually, it's not. It changed many years ago into an information technology business that all of the expertise in their ability to get the right product into the right store at the right time and to have it cooked at the appropriate temperature and presented, whether you like McDonald's or not, they seem to do a very good universal, whether it's in Ukraine or in New Zealand, and I've eaten McDonald's in both places, or in England or in America. And I don't love McDonald's, but I can guarantee you, wherever you are, you're going to get a similar experience. But if you have a look at the technology that has come in, that they adopted very early on, was they developed a supply side technology, and meaning, how do we get the products on the dock of your local McDonald's on time without having overflow, without overstocking their refrigerators and freezers, without understocking it? How do we get that tuned down? It's a real skill to be able to do that. I mean, normally,
Well, a small business hears that and says, well, I can't compete with that because I can't afford those kinds of systems.
okay, so here's the problem we've got. We've got some very large scale models out there that do a wonderful job of, doing everything from financial spreadsheets and supply side communication. You can buy a package that will go into your manufacturing that will scan everything coming in the door, that offset it with the invoices, that puts it in a bill payable. As you sell things, it takes it out of the stocking environment, that then puts it up for a reorder. I mean, you can do that. It's just extremely expensive to get a consultant company to come and do that. And all of a sudden you're giving 10, 15% to this over.
Is it worth it for the small business to make sure that they have the right system and that will pay for bringing a consultant in to put it together?
So I would say, yes, it is, but the right system doesn't have to be the large system or the small system. The problem is, what is the size of system that you want to use? And does it scale? Are you going to be, in one area? Are you going to be in two areas? Oh, by the way, do you need to go and have Arabic and Chinese as part of your language base within your billing systems? I mean, it gets complex pretty quick. I would say this, for a small business operator today, it's got a lot more sophisticated than it was before. The idea of just having a till with some cash in it and having a product, which is the garden market type approach, that is a really fairly easy run business. And there's nothing wrong with that. I would say that, some businesses should stay that way. However, if you're going to online deliveries and automatic invoicing and shipping out, now you've got a different model. Now you really do need a consultant of some form. You can either be that consultant yourself, which is difficult to do because you've got to be able to think outside the box.
Well,
You're already running your business
every single day, and you're not
Right.
thinking about how am I going to put in a brand new system when, I'm a fry cook and I've got a restaurant.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with one right now for our own little property. Is we put in an automatic access control system 15 years ago, and 15 years ago we put in a company that is now being bought by Schlage. It's now being bought by Allegion. We picked the right company. It is their electronic control systems that they now use and they promote. We picked it when it was a 20-man company out of Colorado. And we are fortunate to understand what it was. And so now everything I've got is now being obsoleted because it's now being upgraded. And it's almost impossible to talk to anybody to understand what to do to replace it. So I've got a 15-year-old system that works brilliantly, but if it goes bad, what do I do? And so I'm now my own consultant trying to go through that evaluation of how do we migrate. And by the way, anybody...
that's your business, and you're very familiar with that. But what does your competitor do? Who does he call? Does he call you?
So in the case of a lot of these guys, they call whoever pops up on their SEO marketing page. If you have access control, you'll end up looking at ADT. And ADT is an alarm company, and they really don't know how to do very sophisticated access control. They do it. Don't get me wrong. ADT is a great company. I love them very much. But if you have a unusual need, they're not going to be the ones. So then you go through and you look at access control companies, and that's where you'll get an Allegion or a Schlage. And all of a sudden, you've got a guy who lives 1,000 miles away, 500 miles away, because there's not many people where we live. The closest guy we've got to do this is literally 2 hours drive away. And he's not doing it for $30 an hour. So now you've got yourself into a box where you've got this system that's quite sophisticated, that needs outside expertise to control it.
Yeah.
Um,
So Ed, you know, we're now talking about a problem of, well, how do you justify the system? You've got a system that maybe, oh, say you've got a 10 or 15 person firm, 20 people maybe, and you find out that the system that you need is going to be in the range of $150,000. How do you go through the process of determining whether or not it makes sense yet? You know, I mean, those of us who have taken very small businesses and turned them into larger businesses know that there's this kind of skill that successful entrepreneurs have of picking the right projects at the right time based on the right money. We used to, in back in Colorado, we used to liken that to farmers and ranchers who would basically say, "Hey, we can fix anything with baling wire and chewing gum." You know, so it's like that's how you do it for a while in order to get to the next level. But how, when you get to this point, I mean, how do you make the decision that there's payback on a particular system?
Well, in my opinion, you start with your priorities of your company, because you can't do everything at once. So you have to identify what do you think is going to have the most impact, positive manner on your business. And once you do that, and that requires some cost benefit analysis on the various opportunities. But once you identify what you want to do, and let's say it's a new system, you have to do a cost benefit analysis, as John indicated. You got to look at the cost of the system, the purchase cost, the ongoing cost, and what is it really going to do? What are the benefits is it going to bring into the company? And so that's really important. And unfortunately, a lot of small business people don't do that. They don't want to put things down in writing. They don't want to do an analysis. A lot of times I found that the CEO walks in the door with the idea that we're going to do this today and we're going to spend this money and we're going to get this done. And I'm saying, well, maybe we ought to look at the other stuff that isn't getting done and pick which one we should select.
Yeah.
And then when you try to run numbers, it's all gut. I feel like this is what we need to do. So what I've been pretty fortunate in doing and benefiting a lot of my clients is bringing in consultants, because trying to find the right consultant is not easy.
So
And
you're saying as a consultant, you help your clients
yes,
find
yes.
qualified consultants to do specific tasks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And find the right, if they're looking for a valuation of the company, find the right person that can do it, because they come in all shapes and size and all different types of prices. And what you may be getting isn't what you really need. So identifying that and identifying the right person to come in and do the job is extremely important. I,
Yeah.
all of my clients have CPAs that do their tax returns. I have brought in outside tax experts that have identified opportunities, and my clients come back to me and say, that opportunity you identified 10 years ago, I still get a benefit of that every year on my tax return. So it's an ongoing process. And if you're not looking for these opportunities, and if you're not open-minded, you're losing that opportunity. You're not going to be able to compete in the future as well as you could have.
And so a consultant has the advantage of working with other consultants. You're right. Every client I've ever had a CPA. Now, many of them would only see him once a year for taxes. But as you get a little bit bigger, pretty soon they start doing your quarterly reports, or at least reviewing your quarterly reports. And then, of course, you've got payroll, which is ever more complex these days. Although there are a lot of great payroll companies that will do that for you now, and that's a situation where going out and getting a payroll company is a really smart thing. It's a consultant in a way because they understand the change in the laws, and so getting the right expert is really, I think, and maybe in a sense that's really the discussion today, is really trying to find the right expert to help you through the problems. And in a way, having an advisor who's an overall trusted advisor is maybe one of the reasons that you do that. Some CPAs can be, CPAs, a long time ago when I was working for a very large national consulting company, we did a survey among our 2,000 clients. And they basically told us, so when we asked them, they told us that their CPA was their primary advisor. Um,
And that's probably true
yeah. However,
today.
when we asked the CPAs, do you want to be the primary advisor? The vast majority said no. We're not the primary advisor. We don't want that responsibility.
They don't want the risk.
They don't want the risk. So you find that while that they're listing the only advisor they have, in many cases is a technician. CPAs are rare, in my experience, that are great business advisors. They're technicians for the most part. There are some that are really, really good. You're one of them who have a much broader sense of what to do to run a business, as opposed to simply understanding the rules and accounting process. Um, but it's kind of surprising. The other thing that happened is that about 15 or 20% of them listed their attorney as their primary advisor.
Mhm.
Attorneys are great. A lot of them have good advice. Very few of them understand marketing. In fact, they don't understand marketing. Very few of them understand operations. That's not a great selection for your trusted advisor. So I would submit to you that the trusted advisor of the vast majority of small businesses is by default somebody that you're doing business with. They haven't looked for, don't want, or feel like they can't pay a real advisor to come in and actually help them through these problems. Now, I have found that over the years that once I work with a client for a period of time, 4 or 5 years, my average duration was been 12 years with a client. So, at some point, I supplant the CPA because the CPA doesn't want that responsibility. My job is to grow the company and help them solve problems that growth brings. And growth, yes, is that marketing? Yeah, that's a marketing problem. But growing also causes other problems, personnel problems, cash flow problems. So I found that I had to help them with all of these things. And so this,
Well, I think Ron, as you're talking, I think a good consultant by necessity has to have a strong interface with the CPA involved.
oh
I mean,
yeah,
I don't think a consultant can work in a vacuum. He's trying to bring in some new ideas that are going to meld with and fit with the existing operation. And the person who knows the most about the cost benefit and the liabilities of the company is the CPA. So there's no question that, a consultant, if he fails to interface with the CPA and if he fails to go and honor the input and the dialogue, then he's going to lose that game. He has to do
well,
that.
and thank you for that. I didn't at all mean to make it sound like I supplanted them. I never,
No,
never. I
you're
always
using him in
I
the sense,
directly worked
right,
with
right.
them, and
It's a team effort.
yeah, and they realized very soon. I mean, I'm not going to compete. I'm not competing for their business. The last thing I want to do is get mired in details of the
The
accounting.
last thing you want to do is be responsible for a tax return. that's not your
Man,
responsibility.
oh man, that's exactly
That's what they do very, very
they
well.
do it well.
So let's cut to the chase a little bit and what you both have talked about, and that is there are a lot of consultants out there. In fact, you can have a panel of 5 that you can employ to help you. So you've got a short list. You've got down to 5. So the question is, how do we go and select the right one out of that panel of 5?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you've got the New York Wall Street group that come in and they are expensive, but boy, do they give you a great package of information
Mhm.
and they're very thorough. And then you've got the one man guy who comes in who's been doing this for 25 years and has been in 3 or 4 states and does it. And, so there's that scope. So how do we figure out which one to go with?
Well, that's a good question, and I think we've got about 10 minutes left, and I think that's sort of the wrap-up question is, okay, how do you go about selecting an advisor? What do you really need to look at? What are the pitfalls? And what's that final decision really look like?
So one of them for me has to be, there has to be an ability for that person to communicate with your existing channel of decision makers. There has to be a chemistry of
Hmm.
some form. They don't have to love him, but they at least have to have enough respect to give him the time of day, to share with him the information. So there has to be some degree of a communication, ease of working together situation. So that call it chemistry. I don't know, but there has to be an element of that. And then one other thing that I'll turn it over to you guys. One other thing is I'm going to want to find, and maybe this is just my preference, somebody who has experientially worked in similar industries, similar size businesses, and I want to know the case history. I mean, I'm a little skeptical here. I know that you know this. I know you can do it. I know that you will do it, but what have you done?
Hmm.
Give
Yeah.
me your the
Yeah.
last two clients that kind of fit a little bit in the same scope.
Exactly. And I would say that experience is awfully important here. And so, there are a lot of young people, and in this particular case, I'm talking about young people under 50, okay, who have been out there doing things and might look good on a resume. But when you get underneath the covers, you find out that maybe that's a bad example, but when you get
Under
behind
the
the
hood is a better
scenes,
example.
yeah, yeah, and you really take a look at what have they done. It's like, well, they worked in this company and they were successful in that company, and now they're consultant. It's like, well, no, you need more than experience with a single company. Or they work for a consulting company, and they've had clients, but they've never actually written the checks themselves. They don't know what small business is like because they've always worked for somebody else and never had to worry about where the check was coming from, never had to worry about how you actually do cash flow. So I think one of the criteria for small business, one of the criteria is that you want to pick someone who has already done it, like John suggests, more than twice, because you can be lucky the first time and lucky the second time. So, if to prove that you really know how to do it is one thing, but then there's more to it. Just having done it is not the key. You have to have a certain expertise and training in certain things. If you're a general consultant, you certainly need to understand balance sheets and financial statements and every kind of analysis that you can basically come up with and have. You need someone who naturally understands and has a quest for knowing the analysis of the business. To me, that is very important for reasons that you guys have both mentioned, and that is you can pick the wrong problem. The classic problem in my practice, where I did mostly strategic marketing, the classic problem is I just need more sales and everything will be okay.
I will echo that. That's normally the
Yeah,
presented problem.
yeah.
We
And
just need more
so,
sales,
and of
and we
course, as you're intimating, the answer to that is not
not
necessarily.
necessarily. I
That's
mean, don't get me wrong. More sales is not a bad thing,
not,
but
no, it's not a bad
however, if
thing.
you're wasting money,
Yeah.
all you got to do is waste more money.
Well, that's exactly right. And for instance, in a technical talk, if you have a negative contribution on what you're selling, more business will put you out of business even faster. Okay. In other words, if you're losing money on every sale, yeah, you're just going to go out of business faster. So you need to know that. Are you losing money on the sale? And the average client that I've worked with says, well, no, I mean, we buy it for 10 and we sell it for 20. I said, no, that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about how much labor you have involved in that. Are you in manufacturing and you're doing other value added, processes to this? I mean, there's a whole series of things that goes into the actual cost of goods sold. And so let's go through that calculation. And I will tell you, with hundreds of people, I have never, ever had a small business person go, "Oh yeah, I look at that all the time."
Yeah. Well,
Never.
the flip side of this argument, though, is one that I think we should point out, that you do not make these decisions solely based on the net gain and the profitability. There's a couple of industries out there right now that I think are going out of business because they've analyzed every line item that they're selling, and they have
Yes,
made a
that can happen
decision.
too. Yeah.
They've made a decision not to handle those line items that don't meet a certain threshold of turnover. And the problem is that they're serving an industry that buys some of these low margin turnover items that are incidental. But by the way, when you're doing this job, you really need these other things. And these companies are actually getting rid of them off their stores, because they're not high enough in the return game. And what's happening is they're losing the whole client. The client simply is going, you know what? I'm not going to go to two places. So I'm going to go online, or I'm going to go somewhere else where I can buy my whole kit.
Yeah.
And so the reverse of this logic can work against you. I'm not saying it's a
No,
bad logic.
you're right. And see, that is really the lack of understanding the composition of the customer. So, you have to, number one, you have to know what the cost of goods of sales is. But in a case like you're talking about, you have to know what the cost of the composite mix is. Because
Right.
if you're going to buy milk, you want to buy eggs. And you may want to buy cottage cheese, and you may want to. So I mean, you're not going to having a standalone place that sells milk by itself.
yeah.
They might make money on the milk, but they're not going to have any customers because it's just too inconvenient to go to a one kind of milk place only. Or you go to a screwdriver store. We make a lot of money on these screwdrivers. Yeah, but you don't sell a hammer. And when I'm looking for tools, I need to buy several other things at the same time, or nuts or irrigation equipment. And
So
which is
there's a classic example in the
you're really
Midwest.
getting me going on that one because
Yeah,
I
no, I
keep
know, I know.
watching that.
It's a good topic. In the Midwest, I was working with an associate who was helping a chain of gasoline stores go through, and they had, I don't know, 300, and they were looking at growth and where to position their stores and how to do this. A fairly well-known name. One of the groups came out and said, we're missing an opportunity here, because what we are fundamentally forgetting about is we've got a customer driving a car or a truck right up onto our property and sitting right next to the gasoline pumps. And so I think we can start giving them or selling them some other things that they need to get in their car. And what these guys did is they picked salt, 50 pounds bag of salt, and things that they were going to use in the water supply softeners. And they decided they'd try it out. And guess what? They had a stack of salt right next to the gas station in the middle of winter, where it was icy and snowy. And it was like, yeah, throw one of those things on, throw one of those things on. And so they were positionally there. It wasn't gasoline, wasn't coffee, wasn't donuts. And they added this segment of business that would come in and go certain times. And it was brilliant.
Of course, they led
They just thought through the customer experience.
the march. I mean, the new generation of gas stations really, they only have gas to get the customer to come to the door. They only make money on the rest. None of them make money on gasoline.
This was the start of that trend, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah. So
because they realized it was a vehicle showing up that had to show up once a week, once every 2 weeks. So what else can we move into their car?
So we've come up with experience is an important thing. Building relationships is an important thing. What are a couple more things that you look at to make a decision to hire that consultant? And you're brand
Oh,
new.
I think it's the overall knowledge of the business. It's really important to identify what opportunities are there. And are you setting your priorities correctly? And that it comes down to experience. So you got to really check people's experience. And maybe you should call some of their clients
Absolutely, you should.
and hear directly from them
Yeah,
what kind of value you're bringing into the company.
yeah.
And that would be very, very helpful in making a decision.
So specialized skill, and that's yeah, I'd say that was number three, and then of course the idea of actually checking it out. Small business people are not really that good. They go, well, I like, you know, I liked Ed, but I didn't like Ron very much. I think I'll just hire Ed, and that's legitimate. But you know, really making that final decision, I think comes down to all of those pieces. And then you do have to understand what the form of the relationship is going to take. Uh, can this can this company, this consultant, be available for you? And
Yeah.
can he make a living if you only hire him 3 times a year to come in? Um, will he stay in business if, or do you need someone a little bit more than that? In other words, if you're going to have a good consulting relationship, it takes a long time for that consultant to know your business, even if he has specialized knowledge in it. I would say, and I've recounted this several times. I would say that I was not a good strategic advisor for any client for 2 years, having met with them on a monthly or at least a quarterly basis, but mostly at least monthly, because there are nuances in every marketplace, and there are individual businesses have individual capabilities. And for anybody to learn the capabilities of a business and then overlap that with a marketplace to be able to make those kinds of bigger recommendations, so that you can really focus on what's the direction of the company. It just takes a while. So unless you're going to bring in a technical person, or you need to answer questioned on your financials, or you just need to figure out how am I going to increase my cash flow and how do I increase collections. If you're looking for one of these broader advisors, I think you have to also commit to a longer term relationship so that they can know your business. Their advice will go up exponentially year after year after year
Yes.
as they
It's
follow your business.
it's a long-term proposition.
You bet.
And I think the other thing, I think something nobody really mentioned up to this point in time is you should identify what you want to accomplish.
Not true.
You got to have a job description, and then it gets back to, well, is your job description accurate or not? A lot
Right.
of times when I look at job descriptions for financial people, the important stuff isn't even on the job description.
Yeah.
They're going to their HR department and say, I need a job description. Okay, here's the one we pulled off of the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have any aspects of adding value or improving the operation. And that's really, really important for the future of the company. So you got to
Yeah. I
get that
think
right.
you make a
So
huge point. Improvement is key, a key result. You want to have a relationship with a consultant so that you can see improvement in your business, not so that he can just be rote.
So you guys are dancing around this concept. I don't know if I can summarize it or not, but this is called target acquisition, or the outcome that you're looking for. And I think one of the things we're all agreeing on is that a consultant comes on and he's given an objective and talked through and everything's fine. We've just talked about the fact that over time that is going to change. And so what he's actually been hired to do is not going to be what he ends up doing. He's part of a process of evaluation that hopefully on a combinatorial level of talking with the CPA, of talking with their engineering groups, of talking with their marketing groups, that there will be a consensus that, yeah, we needed to go 25 degrees off center here. We've actually now decided that the idea was right, but we actually need to go 15 to the left. and let's recalibrate. And I think that's part of the consultant has to be flexible enough to redirect, but he also has to be highly communicative. Back in that beginning process of having somebody who has an ability to dialogue with everybody has to be clear. Because we're talking about people's points of view, ideas. There's a lot of ego involved, and how do we bring in the metric of the numbers, the finances, and the facts, and take the ideas and move them off center? I don't like coming to the conclusion that what I thought we were going to do is not right, but I love the fact that we as a group have now shifted to a more correct outcome. And I'll say, fine, we did it. I was wrong.
I think that's the true value of a consultant.
It truly is. So I'm coming back to the best part of a consultant means he has to be able to integrate the ideas and thoughts and bring them to, it's almost like he's a conductor of an orchestra.
Exactly.
You know,
or a quarterback. That's another example.
Well, I'm going to go with the orchestra for a second because, you got the first violinist out there, and typically they're prima donnas and they're going to want to run it their way. And at some point, you have to be able to.
Sounds like the owner of the company, huh?
Well, whatever. I've had an owner of a company who absolutely 100% had wanted to include a very high level technology supply chain system. And then at the last minute say, I don't know, I just don't want to lose control. I'm going to do it. Paper and pencil has been working well.
Sure.
And you've got 6 months of work, you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's like,
well, the owner has to fit into the whole idea of improvement as well. If the
That's exactly
owner
right.
to do his own thing. Well, you guys gave great summaries. I'll end this by simply saying to those who have made it this far, don't be afraid to try.
exactly.
Give a consultant a shot. Give them 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Meet with them for a couple of hours a month and see how it goes. And if it doesn't work after 6 months, try and find another one, because you're not all of us fit with all. I mean, we've all had potential clients or clients that it just didn't work and it needed to stop. And it goes both ways.
And share your underbelly. If you don't share the underbelly of the company, he's going to find out about it anyway.
You have to do that.
But you have to, and every company has an underbelly of some form.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So give it a try, and if you have more questions, come back to this channel and keep watching these videos. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. It was a good show.